a couple of weeks ago, in our Deadpool and Wolverine review, we talked about how I went to see that movie with my parents and how they were politely singing through a movie that in order to understand that movie, you needed to be on top of 25 years of superhero movies, as well as news about superhero movies. And if you were not in the loop on that, the movie just made no sense, even though everything in the movie did make sense. And now I have more sympathy for what they went through, because this movie is exactly like that for me. Like, I understood that stuff was going on and that it probably meant something, and I just had no idea. Having said that, I think the movie did a decent job actually of kind of introducing those topics. So this whole idea of the champion being reincarnated and the cycles and the age of Kali and stuff like that, that actually gets explained in the movie, right? And I think that's the big picture stuff that needed to be there.
This seems like it was a film that was introducing international audience. Well, Daniel, you did mention that this seems like it was a movie for us, but by default, it's pretty much a film that's an introduction to Indian cinema.
So I actually have a comparison here. Have you guys seen Parasite?
Yeah.
Korean movie, won all the awards a few years ago. Mm-hmm. That is a Korean movie made by Korean filmmakers for a non-Korean audience. And so they introduce a bunch of concepts that that would be obvious to Korean audiences. And they change things to make things more generic. Like it's a chat app. And they don't give it the chat app that Koreans would use, that are commonly used in Korea. They use some other name that is more familiar to us, right? So that's an example of a movie that's made for a foreign audience in order to make it more accessible. And this is not that, right? I think it's a complete accident that we saw this movie, or that we became aware of this movie. I think it was made by and for a South Indian audience, and it got popular enough and it got good enough word of mouth that it kind of got pushed out to streaming and limited releases and Western cinemas and stuff like that. And then I heard about it from like YouTubers who normally criticize Hollywood for its storytelling, and then said, hey, but this was just, a good time, spectacle, and so on, right? And so it kind of got picked up and amplified by this, but we were never meant to see it in that sense, right? And I think a movie that's supposed to make this stuff accessible to us would be built completely differently from the start. And actually want somebody to make this movie now. Like, I've actually gotten interested in Hindu mythology now. Like, it's always been so. Actually, funny enough, like 20 years ago, I listened to a podcast about religion. So like talking about like the mythologies and stories and teachings of different religions, right? And there was a Hindu episode, and the host said something like in that episode compared Hindu mythology to Star Wars, like these big epic wars with gods and champions of gods and larger than life creatures and magic weapons and big battles and whatever. And I remember at that time saying, that sounds kind of cool, I should check that out at some point. And then I never really got a chance, because there isn't really any on-ramp for somebody. Like, I think what the thing that this is based on is the longest poem that was ever written at like 200,000 verses or something. It's not accessible. And every time I try to get into Indian mythologies of any kind, but Hinduism seems to be especially strong for Hinduism, it's just jargon and names that are just impenetrable to somebody who is not already familiar with it. And I think there's like if somebody made a genuinely accessible on-ramp for somebody to just get into this stuff, like, this is where you start. If you know nothing about this is where you start. That, I think, is generally missing. And I think these stories are really interesting and compelling and fascinating and so rich. And it's a shame that they're so difficult to get into. And this movie was never supposed to do that for Hinduism, right? But now that I've seen it, and I kind of see the potential, and I kind of see the appeal of these stories and these characters, I kind of want somebody to do this.